Hey everyone, I'm Amy Connell. Thanks for tuning in to Lessons to My Teenage Self, a Christ centered, diet culture free show about all things health for teen girls. This is the shortcut you need to thrive in your physical, mental, and spiritual health. As a personal trainer and nutrition coach, I'm passionate about empowering you to find your best version of health. Each week, we dig into one topic I wish I had known as a teen. I always like to start with a story. And actually, today's story is going to start with when I was more of a young adult because we didn't see caffeine so broadly as we do today. Right now, you can go anywhere and you can get coffee, you can get energy drinks, and of course, you can always get your sodas or pop if you live in the Midwest and that's what you call it, or any wherever, whatever you call it. But when I was first out of college, I actually got married 2 months after I graduated from college. And so my husband and I were newlyweds and I was figuring out like all the things, all the things. And we would have dinner together every night. Well, I discovered that I loved Crystal Light Peach iced tea. And it's something that I had with dinner every night. Well, every night, I also found myself lying awake and getting stressed and getting anxious because I was watching the clock tick by and those numbers going up and turning, and I still wasn't asleep, which was really stressful, which kept me up. And it was like this horrible cycle, and I couldn't sleep and I couldn't figure out why. Well, finally, I figured out that the Crystal Light peach tea had caffeine in it. I don't know why I didn't figure that out. Tea is almost always caffeinated. And maybe I just thought, well, since it came from a powder, it didn't have caffeine in it. I don't know. But I wanted to talk about caffeine today because caffeine, whether we like it or not, has just pretty much infiltrated our lives. And this is something that I wish I would have known when I was younger, and that I really think that maybe there's not enough knowledge about caffeine and what all it does to our bodies right now. So that's going to be my lesson to you today, is what I wish I would have known about caffeine when I was younger. Before I get into this, I am not telling you not to have caffeine. Okay. I wake up every morning and I have at least two to maybe 3 cups of coffee. So I'm not telling you not to have it. Please be clear about that. But there are some considerations that I want you to know. So, one of the most important things to know about caffeine is it has a half-life 4 hours, which means that 4 hours after you consume an item with caffeine in it, you still have half of that caffeine in your system 4 hours later. So let's say you go meet a friend at Starbucks and you get some sort of a latte or something like that, and it's a grande size. That's about 150 milligrams of caffeine, like just say a latte, a grande latte. 4 hours later, you still have 75 milligrams of caffeine going through your system. So if you're meeting a friend at Starbucks or your preferred coffee place at 7 p.m. and you like to go to bed at 10, you still have 75 milligrams or more in your system at 10 o'clock when you like to go to bed. And really it's still there until 11 o'clock. And then 4 hours after that is about 37 milligrams of caffeine. So it takes a while to get out of your system. That's something important to be aware of. If you want to meet your friend at a coffee shop in the evening, that's great. Maybe choose decaf, or if you're at Starbucks or something like that, you can get an item that has less caffeine. A couple alternatives are an iced passion tango tea that's caffeine free, or one of those refreshers. I really like that acai, I think it's strawberry or maybe it's blueberry. That has about 50 milligrams. So that has a little bit of caffeine, but it's not going to impact you for as long. Another thing to be aware of is energy drinks have about 200 milligrams. This can vary somewhat, but 200 milligrams is the equivalent of 2 cups of coffee. And then because they are sweet, either through sugar or through artificial sweeteners, we can take those really quickly. I mean, I've seen people chugging into energy drinks because they're so desperate for something. So I'm trying really hard not to put on my mom hat here, but energy drinks are really hard on your system because you are shoving all of that caffeine into your system very, very quickly. And I will say all of that caffeine at once can be really hard on your system and be hard on your heart. And particularly if you are an adolescent, this is significantly over what the American Academy of Pediatricians recommends. So if you're going to do the energy drinks, I mean, I really want to tell you not to do it. But if you're going to do it, then drink them slowly. Which I know you're like, well, what's the point in doing that? Well, the point is the point is to keep your heart healthy. And that's so I would really like for you to just take it down a little bit. There are other sources of caffeine that you may not be aware of. Caffeine can be really sneaky. So it can be in chocolate and particularly dark chocolate. I remember having a ton, I don't remember what it was, but it was like a ton of dark chocolate one night with my girlfriends, and I was awake for so long. And I think it was probably a lot of different things, but I know that the caffeine in the dark chocolate certainly did not help. Caffeine is also in matcha. It's in kombucha. I mean, these are not super high amounts, but if you find that you are sensitive to caffeine, then this is something to be aware of. It's also in pre-workout supplements, and then some pain relievers like Excedrin has a lot of caffeine in it as well. So be aware that even though it may not be your typical caffeine product, you may not think of it as something that has caffeine, it definitely may have it. Often you can just turn the label around and look, or you can do a little bit of digging online if you want to know more. Another thing to be aware of about caffeine is your body does develop a tolerance to it over time. You may need to have more in order for it to be as effective. I did not start drinking coffee until I was 38 years old. And I always said, see, I can say this because my mom doesn't listen. I always said that's because my mom would make a pot of coffee and then forget to turn the coffee pot off. So I would come home from school every day and be greeted by the smell of burnt coffee, which I really did not like. So I didn't start drinking coffee until I was 38. And if you're thinking, how did she go through life and go through college and go through babies and all of that kind of stuff without caffeine? I'm kind of wondering the same thing, but I did, and I totally made it. So it's definitely possible. When I first started taking it, oh my gosh, I was on fire. And I was teaching spinning classes or indoor cycling classes first thing in the morning. And man, it got me going. Now, 10-ish years later, I just kind of feel normal. So I definitely have developed a tolerance to it. I do enjoy coffee in the mornings. I typically have about 2 cups and then I'm done for the day, and I try to stay away from caffeine for the rest of the day. But your body definitely does develop a tolerance to it over time. So that might be something to consider. Do you want to start building your tolerance at the stage that you are at now? Or do you want to maybe wait until it might be more meaningful to you? That's for you to decide. Like I said, pediatricians generally advise limiting caffeine to 100 milligrams a day. So that's like 1 cup of coffee, or that is 2 sodas. So it is some, like that's okay, but you just don't want to have too much. And again, I would stack it kind of earlier in the day rather than later in the day. So just choose wisely what you have when you have it, knowing how long it stays in your system. The other important thing to be aware of is if you suffer from anxiety, caffeine has been shown to intensify anxiety. So if you are already suffering or dealing with anxiety, and you are not alone, if you are, reducing or maybe even eliminating caffeine, just even as an experiment. Maybe just take it, say, I'm going to take this out for 2 weeks and see how I feel. See if this helps my anxiety. And it might, or it might not. But I think it's worth doing a little experiment on yourself and seeing if that might help. I have a friend who does deal with anxiety, and she stopped drinking coffee for this very reason. She said, it just makes my anxiety worse and it's not worth it. So it's definitely something to try if that is part of your story. The other thing that I do want to recognize is if you are on medications like ADD or ADHD and those keep you awake, talk to your medical provider and say, look, I feel like these are keeping me awake, because you don't want to start this endless cycle of like staying awake and not being able to sleep, and then you feel like you need to get up in the morning and have a bunch of caffeine. So talk to your doctor if you feel like you are on some doctor prescribed for you medications. Don't be taking other people's ADD medications, and that is affecting your sleep as well. And speaking of sleep, next week I'm going to share with you my sleep well approach, giving you several tips on how to get better sleep, because I know this is a challenge for people of all ages. So I am here to help you and to give you some tips and tricks on sleeping better. Be sure to come back next week. Okay, that's all for today. Take today's lesson and go out there and live the life God has for you and your amazing original body.